Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Sean Stanley. I'm the head of Globe Content Studio at the Globe and Mail. We're the content marketing division at the Globe, which of course is a Canadian national media organization. We've been holding these MarTech Mornings for a few years now. This is our third virtual MarTech, and as I was saying to the participants this morning, we actually prefer this format in a lot of ways because as a national media organization, this allows us to take a national scope. And we are pleased to be joined by people from quite a few provinces this morning. And so I'd like to thank all of our participants, first and foremost, for being with us today. I'm going to throw to them momentarily. But before we begin, I wanted to take an opportunity just to talk about a survey that we conducted with a group that we refer to as our Globe Insiders panel. So the Globe Insiders is a group of several thousand Globe and Mail readers who respond to surveys that we put in front of them. Sometimes we ask about our lines of business or new things that we might want to try, but in this case, the questions were very specific to today's discussion, which is intentions around travel and tourism. So we had about 1,100 responses, and so I'm going to show you some of the results before we kick off the discussion. So these are top line results. This was actually a more extensive survey, and at the end of this discussion and over the coming days, we're going to be putting together more slides that will show more results, which eventually you'll be able to find on the Globe Content Studio's website, which is globecontent.studio. And if you check that out sort of mid next week, and we'll put out a newsletter about this as well, you'll be able to see the more fulsome results in addition to being able to watch and share this discussion in its entirety as a YouTube video. So how have travel plans changed was the first question that we asked. So has the COVID-19 pandemic led you as one of our survey participants to do any of the following? And as you can see, about half of those respondents have delayed booking a vacation. About 40% of them have been forced to cancel or delay a vacation that they'd already booked. And about 25% had voluntarily canceled a vacation, probably out of concerns around the virus. Next question, which of the following might persuade you to book a vacation to be taken before the end of 2020. As you can see, some people very much interested in watching how the pandemic is spreading. So when they see a slowdown across Canada or within their own province, that might persuade them to book a vacation. They also want the flexibility to change dates without penalty. And one of the other things that I highlighted toward the end there, 20% could not be persuaded to take a trip during this time. I actually would have thought that percentage would have been higher. So there does seem to be an intention on the part of a large group of Canadians to be able to book some sort of vacation between now and the end of the summer. So in view of the length of time we've been under stay-at-home guidelines, how has that affected your feelings or intentions about a vacation? So here is where we get into the meat, I guess, of the discussion that we're going to be having today, which is that Canadians don't plan to be vacationing too far from home until the virus is either contained or a vaccine or a treatment is available. Some people happy to have a staycation, but still about 31% needing a vacation away now more than ever. And there's intentions to travel within Canada and even in some cases to travel outside of the province. And that will be part of the discussion that we're planning to have after I'm done. So what types of vacations, to wrap things up, are you most interested in taking? Number one, visiting family and friends. Interestingly, cultural destinations still high on the list. And not surprisingly, perhaps as much, outdoor activities. So cottage vacations, adventure vacations, camping vacations, but still some intentions for Epicurean destinations, less intentions around things like train travel, cruises, and amusement parks. No big surprise there, given most of them or all of them will not be open this summer. So with that, I'm going to throw things over to my newsroom colleague, Miriam Siddiqui, who is going to be moderating this discussion. Miriam is the lifestyle editor here at the Globe and Mail, and under that purview falls travel and tourism. So she is probably the person best poised within our organization to lead this discussion. So Miriam, over to you. She'll introduce the panelists and take things from here. So enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this morning, for logging on. Before we start, I just wanted to point out on your screen, you should see a chat box. There'll be a tab that says question and answer on it. We're going to speak for about 40 minutes and with our panel discussion, and then throw the floor, as it were, the virtual floor, over to the audience to answer questions from you. So please feel free to type your questions in there, and hopefully we can get to them before the end of the hour. I wanted to thank our panel for coming, some logging on very early, those who are in BC and Alberta. With me this morning, I have Richard Bartrem, who's Vice President, Marketing Communications at WestJet. Cookie Boyle is Executive Director of Global Content at Destination Canada. Jeremy Haas is Marketing Director of Canada for Club Med, and Raina Williams, Senior Regional Manager at Canada at Expedia Group Media Solutions. I'm sure the effect of the busiest travel times in the year, and it's slowly right at the start of summer, primarily and will continue to do so for the rest of the year. So I'm really keen to have this discussion with you all. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Richard, I might just start with you for the first question. Can you give some examples of how your business was affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I think we are not much different than any other airline that you would have seen around the world. But as we saw the effects of COVID-19 come into Canada, it was about mid-March. We were already making decisions to pull down some of the flying that we were doing. But just to give some numbers or some stats to go along with it, it was swift and devastating. So WestJet would have 181 aircraft in our fleet. 150 of those aircraft would be parked right now. So we then shut flying into Europe, into the US. Started to do some repatriation flying on behalf of the Canadian government, and we're responding to RFPs to actually go and bring Canadians home from South America through the Caribbean, some into Europe, and then started doing some cargo flying for some of the PPE and medical equipment that needed to move around the globe. And since then, we've seen demand fall by roughly 95%. We're now starting to see that slowly start to come up, albeit very slowly. And that's been probably the biggest challenge for us is the cliff that demand dropped off, and just wanting that to come back and working towards that now.
Great, thank you so much. Jeremy or Raina, do you want to speak to this as well?
Yeah, I could say that, obviously, as Richard mentioned, we've all been hit really hard in the industry, and, no one is shy to the decrease in demand of bookings. And our immediate response was focused on the most critical actions we could take to support our partners and our travelers. And, in a lot of ways, helping our advertising partners with data insights and helping them stay close to the behavioral changes and motivations and understanding what's the right time to get back into market and talk to our partners.
Jeremy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, well, it was pretty similar. We, for the first time in Club Med history, so since 70 years, all our resorts were closed in April. So we had to face, as all of you, this extraordinary situation, and we had to repatriate all our customers, employees, as our first priority was the safety of all of them. So it was quite an emergency mode, but it went well, hopefully, and now we are preparing the rebound.
Great. Cookie, maybe you can start with this next question. Through the past few months of the pandemic, what have been some of the most important steps you've taken to communicate with your partners?
Thank you, and good morning. I'm honored to be here. I'm from Destination Canada, and as some of you may not know, we're the Canadian Tourism Commission. So our focus has traditionally been international marketing and some domestic marketing. And so the shift that we've had with our partners has been twofold and significant. One, we realized the importance of having great research, so people were making the best evidence-based decisions. And so we have shifted how we provide research. We're absorbing that cost and providing it to our partners. So whether that be provincial marketing organizations or city-based or Pan-Canada. Partners such as ITAC, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, or Parks Canada. And that research is available online at destinationcanada.com. We have a research tab. So it's available for everyone to be making great decisions based on our research. So that was number one. And the second big shift we made was in really changing how we partner. So we used to work with partners to market internationally, and now we are supporting our provincial partners to market domestically and at a very community-based level. So we are supporting them financially to tell those community and local stories. So that's been a complete shift in how we work.
Great, thank you. Has transparency and communication changed for any of the rest of you?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in there. Sorry, but from an airline perspective, the transparency and communication, the biggest thing for us has been to communicate transparently on the hygiene protocols that are now taking place on board the aircraft and throughout the airport. Immediately, we saw people wanting to understand, even before borders shut and some of the flying started to come down, wanted to understand what steps were being taken to make the journey safer. So a lot of information had to be compiled. A lot of work had to take place in the background, first and foremost, so that we could get further cleaning enhancements put in place, and then that had to be communicated out to the people who were either considering traveling or those who had trips coming up. But the big thing there for us was to be able to communicate that the efforts that were being undertaken from airports and into the aircraft itself were considerable, and that the risk of contracting COVID-19 on an aircraft is incredibly low, given the technology that is on board the aircraft. And there's we had to fight against some of the cliches where it's just recycled air that actually runs through the aircraft, but the entire aircraft, the entire fleet runs HEPA filters that allows 99.9% of those pathogens to be captured, and the entire air on the aircraft gets recycled every 2 to 3 minutes with fresh air coming in. So getting that information out was one of the biggest challenges for us going into this.
Raina, did you want to add?
And then maybe...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Go ahead, Raina.
Thank you. Supporting and communicating with the travelers has been our priority, and we've accomplished it through a number of different ways. And, first and foremost, implementing new lodging cancellation policies to provide travelers options in the very early stages of the pandemic was key. Lodging and health and cleanliness information is super important, something that our travelers are looking for as they start to come back and engage in travel interest again. Flights with the change fees are clearly marked to help our customers explore flexible options in making their plans change, should decisions change or the government changes. And we also now offer self-service options to help the customers manage their bookings without having to speak to an agent. And I didn't mention earlier on the media solutions side, which is essentially the advertising arm of Expedia. We've been working with our marketing partners to ensure we can help them inspire and reignite travel.
Great, thank you. And Jeremy?
I joined Raina about the transparency concerning all our terms and conditions. It was key to be very clear about what were the different options for our customers who had their stay cancelled. And as we had our call center completely overloaded, so we had to be very transparent, especially on our websites, with our partners to give them a clear visibility on what would be done for all our customers. So yeah, was our main priority, with obviously safety and security for all.
Great, thank you. Because there was, and there frankly continues to be, so much to communicate to audiences, have you changed any of the ways in which you communicate? For instance, opening up new channels or finding new ways to be in touch with your customers? Cookie, do you want to go ahead?
I'll hop in. we have, I mentioned again previously that we worked with provincial and city-based tourism organizations, among others, and we immediately began having weekly Pan-Canada calls, which were quite remarkable. It was really well attended. We found that if you're working in tourism from Newfoundland to Nunavut and all around the country, people wanted to hear what others were doing. So it was an opportunity for us to bring everybody together across the country and to share learnings and insights, and also just to feel like we're in this together. It was really having that Team Canada approach to what we were all facing. So that was one of the biggest changes, and it's been really well received.
That's great. Thank you. Raina, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there was a number of different changes that needed to be put into place to support our customers and our partners. And so, reacting very quickly with our lines of communication to support all of those changes was definitely a priority for us.
And Jeremy.
And maybe a quick word, because at some point we have completely stopped to advertise our products. I mean, it was not time in April to advertise or communicate about good deals and go on holidays. So we've switched to a more relational approach, and we've launched a Club Med at Home project. So it was a range of activities that we were offering to our customers, such as yoga lessons, kitchen classes, activities for kids at home. So it was a way to maintain the link with our customers, offering them some activities that they could find in our resorts, but unfortunately they were closed. So it was our way to communicate at this time.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really fun. And Richard, I know you've had a ton to communicate.
Yeah, there's been an awful lot to communicate, and it has been, much as Jeremy said, stop the product advertising, although from a loyalty perspective, people did want to hear about some of the concerns that they would have on their specific accounts. So there would have been upgrade certificates, or there would have been vouchers in their account, and wanting to understand what's the expiration date look like, what happens to my status within the program, and can that be extended, or can the qualifying period be changed? So communicating those pieces out, communicating, as I said, the hygiene piece. We managed to, or decided to, put everything into the bucket of communicating out what is factual about what's going on right now versus trying to get anybody into the dream stage. It just didn't feel that would be on point, or would have come across as tone deaf if we were talking about all the wonderful places that you could go, as we were still trying to unravel the effects of the pandemic. So we kept it very much to, here's what we're actually doing, and here's how it's going to affect you in the very near term.
Great, thank you. I'm curious how you've worked with others during the past few months, and if there's been any new collaborations or new partnerships that you've done sort of out of necessity, but that you see continuing into the future as things start to open up. Raina, do you want to start this?
Yeah, this pandemic is one thing. It's affected all of us, and so it's connected us in a much closer way. And there's a clear feeling that, we're witnessing collaboration on a new level. We partnered with our internal team that we call TAP, which is our Travel Agent Affiliation Program. And we created a new education platform called PACT, which is passionate about Canadian travelers. And recognizing that domestic travel was coming back first, we partnered with Destination Canada to introduce an education webinar series, Canada Spotlight series, giving every province across the country the opportunity to educate the travel trade on their highlights, hidden gems, and new safety measures in an effort to stimulate and reignite that domestic travel. And if there's one thing we've learned, crisis is not competitive. It's definitely more about collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy, do you have any a new relationship that you see carrying forward?
Yes, we obviously we had to work very closely with airlines companies such as WestJet, because we are selling packages. So it includes the land part and the air part, and we had to align our flexibility conditions, as an example, to make it simple for our customers. we've been working a lot with insurance companies to find solutions to cover these new situations we were not ready to face. We've been working very closely with our on-site partners to put in place a wide range of new procedures to make sure that all our activities would be safe. And of course, we've been working a lot with our partners, travel agencies, to help them as much as possible with their direct customers. So, yeah, I think we've been working a lot to rediscover and find new ways with to work with our partners.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Richard?
Yeah, it's a we're learning very quickly that there's other types of organizations that we're now partnering with, and even within the halls of government, recognizing that there's now new relationships that we have had to explore very quickly. So working with the various health authorities, both federally and into the provinces across the country, to understand what are the requirements going to be as we try and move people across the country, and then working with medical equipment providers. So having gone from the painstaking work that goes into whether your uniform should look like this or that, and should the scarf be here or here, and then going to very quickly wanting to understand, okay, where are we going to get gowns and face shields and gloves and eyewear and wipes by the millions, so that we can actually continue to operate. So those are the sort of new relationships that we're seeing behind the scenes. And then we're working very closely with Destination Canada and working with the provincial marketing bodies to understand how we're actually going to get people moving in within Canada.
I saw in the news that WestJet, I think, like, you were donating what traditionally would just be like flight snacks to community centers and things like that. Is that something that you had already done, or is that because of the situation that we found ourselves in?
No, it's very much from the situation that we found ourselves in, where we had, as you would expect, we fly more than 25 million people a year. So we have in inventory hundreds of thousands of cookies and pretzels that weren't going to be used for, at that point, we didn't know how far out. So we wanted to make sure that at least if that stuff was sitting in inventory, we could find good use for it. So we started to give it to some of the food banks, and then it started making its way into school lunches. Even though there was no school, there were a variety of community organizations that were still making sure that school children were being fed despite being at home. And so you would have seen WestJet Snack right across.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Cookie, you mentioned when answering the earlier question that you've been working, Destination Canada has been working with provinces in new ways. I'm just wondering how have they responded to that? And I'm assuming very positively. But do you see that in more invested relationship as something that will go forward?
Absolutely. So we are, our Team Canada approach is critical. We are starting with supporting local and hyper-local travel, and you can understand that from a pan-Canada approach, it's hard to capture authentic local stories. So working with the provinces and the cities to capture those stories, to celebrate the communities is critical to us. So we've been working very closely with our provincial and city partners. We've also been working with commercial partners such as our friends here, Expedia and WestJet. And we've also been developing a new travel trade training program that Raina mentioned. And so it's been a shift for us to be supporting travel agent training domestically, because we traditionally focus on international travel, but understanding that travel agents will be selling domestic first, helping them learn all the great places and destinations in this country that they can support Canadians to explore.
Great, thank you so much. Now that things are starting to open up in certain places of the country more than others, I'm just wondering, and maybe Richard, you can kick this discussion off, but what you're hearing from partners and customers as far as priorities going forward for the next few months.
Well, I mean, there's an interesting, Raina said that there's no competition in crisis, and I partially agree with that statement, because to some degree there actually is competition, and we are now around the world now trying to get people to move and to travel. And I think what we are seeing as the economies around the world start to come back, people are looking to travel within their own city, and then they might travel within their own province or state, or they may stay within the country, and then they'll visit the neighboring country, and then they'll actually travel internationally. So it seems that each sector or each jurisdiction is going through that same sequence. So where we find ourselves right now is, and you hear a lot of it, whatever city you happen to be in, you'll hear about go out and visit this particular restaurant or go to this particular event to actually get the economy going through tourist dollars or through tourists actually going back and through. The challenge we're faced with in Canada is this patchwork of restrictions that remain in place, and none of it consistent from one province to the next. So as much as we may want to get Canadians moving and say, hey, it would be great for you to go and visit insert province or insert city here, if those restrictions aren't consistent across the country, that becomes a big challenge for all of us. And we are falling behind in terms of how other countries are actually responding or trying to get their economies moving again. So there needs to be, first and foremost, we need to address the challenge, or what we've been calling this patchwork of restrictions. So at least there's this consistency across the country so that people can decide, I want to get on a plane and I'm going to go from Calgary to Toronto, or from Toronto to Vancouver, or into Montreal, and then I understand what are the restrictions that are in place, and then I'm not then having to isolate when I get back home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Reina, are you hearing similar concerns on your end? Like if someone wants to, or if an agent wants to book through Expedia for a hotel stay for their client, it's maybe I'm in Toronto and I want to go to St. John's, but how do I know what's going to happen in 3 weeks or something?
Yeah, the needs and the wants and situations of the travelers have definitely changed, but the one thing that hasn't changed is, the trust that we need to instill in those travelers and making them feel safe and secure. And what we've seen from a number of surveys and studies is telling us that travelers are looking among 5 themes when they prioritize travel now. Health and safety is number 1, and we're obviously already seeing airlines and hotels are working really hard to support these concerns. Richard was talking earlier about going into all of the different back-end support that they need to take to make travelers feel more comfortable. Flexibility is, majority of our lodging partners are already well positioned with the refundable policies and security and convenience, and putting that consumer confidence back into the market. Staying local and feeling safe is another priority for the customers. And that's where we're starting to see that domestic from the intra-provincial level, and then we'll start to see that open up through interprovincial. And as the borders release, they'll feel more comfortable traveling. And we're seeing in a lot of studies, including our own, that the value of the dollar is more important now than ever. And maximizing how many travel trips are they actually going to take, how often are they going to be able to travel, and are we going to be in a situation where they're not going to be able to travel again in future? So maximizing that dollar is really important to them. And I think probably the most important is just providing destination and timing guidance, helping them understand what's open, what's safe, and where is it okay to travel.
Great, thank you so much. And Cookie, from an umbrella point of view, because you've got regional and provincial members coming to you for information, what are their priorities?
Absolutely, I will echo what Reina was saying. So the priorities that we're hearing is people need to know, one, is it safe to travel because of the differing restrictions? One, is it safe to travel? And 2, if I go there, what is open? What can I actually do? So those are the priorities. The other thing that we've been tracking since this started is resident sentiment. So are communities even willing to welcome visitors? And we've been tracking that across 5 ranges. So are you willing to welcome people from near your community, in your province, across Canada, from the US and internationally? The research is available on our website, but it's been fascinating to watch every week the numbers go up, and seeing that if we were having this conversation 3 months ago, the community sentiment, meaning am I willing to welcome visitors, was very low. And we're seeing that in the last 2 weeks really track higher, and people willing to welcome and openly welcome visitors. So that's been an important part for our partners, is to understand, is their community actually even willing to welcome visitors? And the answer as of today is much more so than previously.
That's great. That's great to hear. I've heard stories, and as someone who is assigning destination travel editorial, that's been a concern of mine. I can tell someone to go to Calgary or to visit Montreal for a long weekend, but if the local community doesn't actually want them there, then we're putting both parties in an awkward situation. Jeremy, maybe you can kick off the discussion for the next question that I have, which is if you're seeing patterns or interest shift with your customers for where people want to go or for how long they're willing to travel.
The main change we notice, well, obviously, is people are looking for a short-haul destination at this stage, and they will either stay in Canada or in North America, maybe in the Caribbean, but they probably won't travel in Europe, as an example, or much less. But also they will be looking, and I think it's the main change, for last-minute holidays, where we had before, we were more used to an early booking market. We have to switch to a very last-minute communication plan. So we need to adapt this, and also to answer the desire to get flexible conditions. We need to adapt our offer by having a new cancellation policy answering to our customers' needs.
Fantastic. Reina, have you seen pattern shift?
Yeah, so as the country, states, provinces, and cities are all at various stages of the impact recovery, I mentioned earlier that domestic is going to come back first. And then as we see in different parts of the globe, as government restrictions start to lighten, we see traveler motivation shift. And it's really going to be less about where they're going and more about who they're going to see. And then on the transportation side, obviously with domestic being priority, we're seeing a lot of uptick in car rentals or people engaged in doing their own car trips. But in the world of travel, convenience is king. And so we do anticipate that flights will come back quickly as restrictions start to open.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, as far as even like searches and I don't know how many people are booking like a trip to Italy for the fall yet. But what have you noticed as far as patterns changing?
I mean, we're certainly seeing through search queries, we're seeing that intent change. But booking to Italy would be a challenge right now because we haven't loaded the system. Typically, what we would do is load the system twice a year, where we would put in a summer schedule and a winter schedule, and that's when you would see the new destinations come out. And that is an awful lot of work that goes into doing that twice a year. But even before COVID, the team that ordinarily would do that twice a year had to do within the space of a year upwards of 10 schedule changes because of the MAX and that aircraft being grounded. And now, on top of that, they've had to add to their duties doing all of that schedule, or all of those schedule changes on a monthly basis. So we have just put out our July schedule last week. That would be a doubling of capacity from where we were in June. It sounds like a great number, but when demand has fallen off 95%, we're very slowly starting to bring it back on. So we are seeing those. We are seeing those queries shift, and it's exactly as Reina said, that as we see markets start to open up, that interest is generated, and we witness that through what people are looking for. But the big challenge for us now is we're still waiting to see what those international restrictions are going to be, so we can decide whether or not it's a worthwhile endeavor to load Italy, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you just mentioned sort of your team taking on a bit more, the load doubling for month over month. So obviously that means more work internally, which leads to my next question, which is, we've talked a lot about external audiences, but obviously the need to communicate internally has been just as, if not more important. And I'm just wondering what's changed for your teams as far as communication to staff or empowering them to communicate your messaging. I think of like hotels who have literally frontline staff, or Richard, gate ticketing agents and gate agents who are still at airports. So maybe you want to start with this. How have you changed communicating with your team?
Yeah, it's been as fascinating, if not more, than trying to communicate to the customers, because on the one hand, very much you are trying to get that safety message out to the to the traveling public, but you're also trying to convey that same safety information for those people who are going to be working on the front line. Is it safe for me to be on an aircraft? Is it safe for me to be at the airport? And our business is very much volume driven. So a good percentage of those people who would be the ticket agents, the customer service agents at the airport, or the flight attendants on board are on leaves of absence. So if you look at WestJet being a 14,000 employee population, upwards of 10,000 of them would be on leaves of absence right now because there simply isn't the demand to warrant that number of customer service agents or flight attendants or what have you to be on the job. So they remain part of the wage subsidy program. That's been an important program for us to actually keep them on the payroll and to be able to keep communicating with them. So that has certainly been a benefit for us. But the big thing that they want to understand is what does the future look like? If you go back to February and the size of airline that we were with the number of flights that we had, to suggest that we're going to be back up to that by this Christmas would be highly unlikely. And I think you'll see that with most travel organizations, that this isn't simply going to come back to where it was once before within a matter of months. So communicating out to them has been a Herculean effort, and that's actually one department where we've had very minimal temporary layoffs because the need to communicate internally has been so paramount.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Jeremy, you mentioned call centers and also staff on the ground at your destinations. How have your communication efforts changed to address them?
We've all switched to a remote work conditions. So our main challenge was first to make sure that, for example, the call center would be able to operate from home. And then we have tried to be as much transparent as possible with all our employees about working conditions, about the future of the company, how strong we were to face the crisis. So we've set regular team meetings to be clear about our main priorities and to make sure that everybody was on board and we were answering all their concerns.
Great, fantastic. And Reina?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that, we made a number of changes, responding to travel shoppers and the needs and wants that they had in the initial stages, leading into now where they're starting to dream and we're starting to see search and demand increase. So we started to circulate what we call the Playbook so that we could keep a global pulse on a weekly basis with all our data points, as well as all the surveys that are being taken through our brand teams to understand exactly what's happening and empower our team so that we could be the best that we can in the communications to our partners and our travel shoppers.
Fantastic. And Cookie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, we have, we're headquartered out of Vancouver. And so like many of us, we haven't seen each other since the 13th of March. But we also have offices in 9 countries around the world. So from England to India to Australia and China, and working with our international team, even just from a time perspective, has been interesting. We've had some 11 p.m. calls to get everyone on the call at once to share insights. And also in the same way that travel in Canada currently is opening up in an asymmetric way. Also, travel interest internationally is asymmetric. There's more interest, for example, in Australia, we're hearing, than currently in other places such as China. So as we're marketing in those areas, we also have to be very sensitive to local on the ground sentiment. So that's been interesting to us as well, to connect even more so with our international markets and understand what their appetite is.
Great, fantastic. We've talked a lot about as Richard put it, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's been a lot of work. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it.
Assuming I said it right.
It's on the tip of my tongue. But I'm sure amidst all the craziness, I'm sure there's actually been some wins that you've seen over the past quarter. And so I'm wondering if you'd like to share some of those. Reina, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, you may have seen an announcement that came out last month that we at Expedia Group have committed $275 million to support our partners rebound from the impact of COVID and fuel the industry with a number of different recovery efforts. And on the media solutions side, our commitment of $25 million in advertising relief will be interjected to support our partners in a number of different ways.
Fantastic. Jeremy? Oh, Jeremy, do you have any? Oh, there you go. There we go.
Sorry, I was on mute. Our last main win was to reopen our first resort in North America. So we've reopened recently Club Med Sandpiper in Florida. So it was a major win as we have great feedbacks from our customers about the customer experience. We've reached to reinvent the experience in our resorts. It's on one point, it's safe, but it remains holidays. I mean, people are here to enjoy. And we have very good feedback about the food and beverage experience, the activities on site. It's obviously even cleaner than before, but it's safe, but it remains holidays. And we're very happy to see that our customers are happy to be with us and waiting for other resorts to open soon.
And when did that open?
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago in 10 days ago in Florida, and we plan to reopen soon. Next week in Cancun, our second resort in the zone, and we will reopen starting next week. Lots of resorts in France, in the French Alps as well. Great,
congratulations, Richard.
Yeah, I mean the wins have been you take them where you can get them. The first one for us was the ability to very quickly source at scale the personal protective equipment that was going to be needed in 38 cities within Canada. So that work went on very quickly and has allowed us to actually continue operating. The work that went into figuring out how do we offer seat distancing on the aircraft, how do we actually at scale introduce temperature checks at all of our airports. All of that work went along very well. And then, interestingly, one of the biggest challenges is the weather, and these aircraft ordinarily are moving almost nonstop. And to have the bulk of the fleet sitting, they're also sitting ducks for hail, and so we had an absolutely massive hailstorm here in Calgary just a couple of weeks ago, and with 50 aircraft on the ground, they were at significant risk. But our technical operations team went and bought an awful lot of rink board, so the puck board that you would see on a hockey rink here in Canada, and cut it in the shapes of all the flaps that you see on board the aircraft and taped them to all of that. And they had to do that very quickly, and we had a hailstorm that flooded our head office building at the airport, and yet none of those aircraft were affected. So little wins like that the public may not see, but it does allow us when the rebound comes and we're going to need those aircraft to be flying once again. It's good to see that they're going to be well taken care of.
For sure. Congratulations on that. I saw pictures of the hail. It looked very intense. Cookie, do you want to share any of the wins from Destination Canada?
Sure. Pleased to. I'd say the biggest win is how we've completely pivoted how we work. Most of our focus was international. And we've reallocated those funds to the provinces so they, again, can support the cities. So we have pivoted from leading the marketing to listening, to supporting and listening. And that's an interesting place for marketers to be. So hearing from the communities, having them tell their stories, that's been a big shift. But it's been a great shift because we are supporting the cities and our partners to welcome back travelers. So that's been, I'd say, the biggest win, a complete pivot in how we work.
Fantastic. Yeah, no small feat, for sure. This is my last question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. Quite a few questions have come in from them. If you could give another travel company some advice based on what you've experienced in the past few months, what would it be? And I'll start with Richard.
Oh man, I thought you were going to start with me last. I was hoping that you were going to start with me last with that one. What advice would I give? I think it would go back to the transparency and then in collaboration. And so this is something the world has never seen before. And this is the piece where there's no competitors in crisis. This is where I do agree with that piece. So the notion of conveying to the consumer that it is safe to travel. We shouldn't be competing on safety and suggesting that any one travel product or entity is safer than another. We should be working towards a standard so that the public at large can travel and feel comfortable that they are traveling safely. So I think that would be the two biggest pieces for me, would be a heavy lean into the collaboration piece that is required for all of us to successfully convey that it's safe to go again. Yep, that would be it.
Great, thank you so much. Cookie?
I absolutely agree. We have reached out to people we never would have spoken with before. So, for example, we're on a call with Visit California, who we see as a great competitor, but understanding how they're working and how they're responding. That conversation never would have happened pre-COVID. We've reached out to tourism marketing organizations in Australia, for example. How are you handling it? What are you learning? And sharing our learnings with them. Again, never would have happened. We're working even more closely with commercial partners such as WestJet and Expedia, and to make sure that we're able to provide as much information, be as helpful as we can to travelers looking to travel in Canada. And so we're expanding. What we see as our role really is to provide that helpful resource for travelers across Canada.
Great, fantastic. Reina?
Yeah, staying top of mind can help keep potential travelers engaged and reduce the recovery timeline. Take the time to plan ahead and build the relationships with your key stakeholders and ensure everyone is working off the same playbook. And I would say, don't go dark. Even if your responsibilities and roles have changed, find a way to pivot towards relevancy with your partners and your travelers.
That's a great piece of advice. And Jeremy?
I totally agree with what's been said. I would maybe add it's key to listen to your customers and partners' expectations. Ask them what they are waiting for, when they will be ready to travel again, and to better understand what we need to work on. So listen to our customers, having a flexibility and transparency. And finally, making it as simple as possible. I think we've all been struggling with new procedures, canceling files, an amount of files we were not used to, generating credits, and then defining new terms and conditions. And it's where it can sometimes be very complicated for either partners or the customers. And it's beautiful to make it simple. So that would be my recommendation when it's possible to think easy.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, I'm going to launch into some audience questions. As I said, we have quite a few, so we'll get to as many as we can before the seminar wraps up at the top of the hour. This is from Kelly, and it's a question for Jeremy and Reina. For Richard and Reina. Will you be considering any adjustments to pricing of inter-Canada travel, for example, flight costs, to make it more affordable or to build an added value for Canadians who want to travel domestically?
Yeah, Richard, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Reina. I think what you'll see is the market will dictate what that pricing is going to be, and given
some technical difficulties, but Reina, maybe do you want to, until we get Richard back, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, among the priorities from our travelers, one of them is going to be value and how far their dollar can take them. And that is really something as an organization that we're working with our partners to make sure that we are, relevant in market, that we are providing what our travelers are looking for, and we're making it more affordable for them to continue to travel.
Okay, great. If Richard does, or when we get him back, I'll just invite him to provide his answer to that question. But in the meantime, we have a question from Sean. If there's another setback, like a second wave, how are you and your teams planning to react if there's another series of lockdowns? Jeremy, do you want to start?
I'd say that we would be more ready than the first wave. So that would be the first good news. But so we are putting procedures in place to be ready in case it would happen again. We are also working with partners and insurances to provide the good level of services to our customers if it happens again, and collaborating with the government, local governments, to make sure that we would be ready to handle a second wave.
Fantastic. Cookie, from Destination Canada's point of view, has there been any thinking about this?
Yes. So the work that we're doing now is with the provinces and the cities, as I mentioned, because of that asymmetric opening, which we've talked about before. So, for example, Nunavut's not welcoming visitors right now, nor is Newfoundland. So our program allows for the provinces to run their marketing and the marketing that we're supporting at the time that's right for them. So asymmetric, but also it allows us to pull back if necessary. So we aren't going out and saying, explore Canada across the country right now, because we're in case there is a shift. So in this case, we're focusing our marketing initially at the provincial level to support them and with the cities. So should anything shift, that we can then pull back and not be in a pan-Canada mode, and then have to shift what we're doing.
Okay, great. And Richard, thank you. Glad you were able to get back to us. Did you want to speak to the previous question? Or?
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that you got. The part you missed was brilliant, but it's very distracting. It's very distracting when your face is frozen like this and you're trying to decide whether or not you're actually or not. But from a pricing perspective, I certainly think that you're going to see the market dictate. We've got a amount of capacity we would like to bring back online. The competition, other airlines will have a bunch of capacity they're going to want to bring back online. And typically what you don't see is when you actually need more customers that you raise your prices. So I think what you will see is some aggressive pricing in the market as we actually try and get the entire travel economy kickstarted and moving again. But conversely, one of the challenges there is we are seeing and the question was asked within the context of what about airfares and what's going to be happening to ticket prices. And of course, within that are airport improvement fees and other fees that are then passed on, or we pick up and collect and then pass on to those various entities. So already we are seeing airports across the country who are taking dramatic increases in airport improvement fees. We're seeing NAV Canada, who control the skies for us from an air traffic control perspective. They have taken significant double-digit price increases. All of that then, of course, gets passed on to the consumer. So as it takes a village to raise a child, it's going to take a tourism or travel village to actually respond to this effectively. And I think we really have to tread carefully in terms of those price increases that we're going to expect the consumer to pay, just as they are very trepidatiously wanting to put a toe back into the travel waters.
Fantastic. And we were just talking about sort of any anticipated planning in place should a second wave hit us and another lockdown take place.
Yeah, the planning for us would be then what does the capacity that we're bringing on board look like? What travel restrictions or travel requirements or safety requirements will be required of us, whether that's in the airport or in the aircraft. So those would be the pieces we would need to pivot on quickly is where do we actually start to move some of that capacity or bring it down, bring it back up, and then what requirements would be required from a hygiene perspective.
Great, thank you. And Raina, did you want to speak to Expedia's plans, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Jeremy's sentiments were, that we're more ready now, having experienced the first wave. So there's a lot of different policies and procedures put in place to manage a second wave if necessary. So having done it the first time, I feel like we're more prepared than ever.
Great, thank you so much. Jeremy, we have a question from Tracy. How is Club Med managing the health and safety at resorts?
So first measure was to reduce our capacity. We have reduced our capacity in resort to 70%. So meaning that there will be more space for our customers. And then we've launching several actions in terms of, for example, in restaurants, they are open. We have extended their opening hours. We have also, we are now serving to plates. We have less buffets. We have people serving our customers, and we've restricted some activities on site. So, and of course we have reinforced all the cleaning procedures that we are having in our resorts. So it's a wide range of procedures to ensure that everything will be safe, clean, offering a good customer experience for our clients.
Great, thank you so much. Here's a question for Sean, and maybe Cookie is best positioned to at least start the discussions. How concerning is the COVID situation in the United States as it impacts the delay of the rebound for tourism?
Yes, we are tracking that, tracking resident sentiment closely. And you'll see weekly that residents' welcome for travelers from the U.S. is not moving nearly as quickly, or the uptick is not nearly where it is for communities, for provinces and across Canada. So if you look at our weekly research, you'll see that there is still, we used to see a barrier at the provincial level. So resident sentiment for welcoming people outside their province was significantly lower than inside the province. And now we're seeing that Canadians are willing to welcome people across Canada. Those numbers are going up. But the border, those numbers are really not changing. And in some areas, international travel other than the U.S. is almost as welcome as U.S. travel. So it is something that we're tracking, and we're very aware of resident sentiment for that.
Richard or Reina, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, it's a it's certainly a concern for us, and we are grateful for the research that Destination Canada is doing, because we're seeing that and recognizing that the sentiment to have Americans come into Canada or from other parts of the world into Canada, it lags within the other provinces, and that helps us helps influence how we make decisions from a capacity perspective. And I know that one of the other questions was travel bubbles in other parts of the world, and do we see that happening here? And it's difficult when we're such a big country and there's really only one other country next door, and that is that the country you want to bubble with, and so that's something we're monitoring closely, but is a concern for us, because there's obviously as we move through the summer and into fall and winter, there is demand to get into a variety of destinations down there, and if that doesn't correct itself, or at least give people the comfort that they can travel there, it's going to be a challenge.
Reina, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier in the call that traveler sentiment changes as we start to see restrictions lighten, and we talk a lot about domestic travel, and we're already starting to see in the U.S. that as the Caribbean opens up, we start to see international pickup. So, it's really about listening to the customer and listening to what is the changing evolution of this recovery.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've got 2 minutes left. I'm just wondering if you have any last words that you want to share with the audience before we end our webinar. If you just raise your hand, I can call on you. And there we go. Thank you, Cookie.
There you go. Somebody had to open it. Yeah, our perspective really is one of support. Team Canada, together we'll get through this, and we are better together. So finding new ways to support each other is vital to the work that we're doing.
Fantastic, thank you. Did anyone else want to add anything?
I would definitely echo. Sorry.
Go ahead, Reina.
Sorry, go ahead, Reina.
Echo Cookie's sentiments. Better together. Collaboration, and just all staying really close to keep this industry and focus on revival.
Thank you. And Richard?
Yeah, and the better together, which I agree with, includes, though, we need to get to a consistent framework from a health perspective across Canada. And without that, the hopes that the consumer would actually understand where I can and can't go and what's required when I go there is going to be, just makes it that much more difficult for us all.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much, Jeremy, Cookie, Raina, Richard. I really appreciate taking the time. Some of you, Cookie, Richard, very early in the morning. Thank you to all our attendees. I apologize if we didn't get to your question, but I hope everyone is able to get out on the road soon very safely and enjoy your day. Thank you all, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.